Whenever you are trying to reach for glory, you can't have a plan B. You want to know why? It does nothing but distract you. And not only that, it's going to make you go at it half ass. And it's just not the way to go, is it? Well, guess what? We're going to talk about Tom Aspinall's dad and the reason why he didn't have a plan B when he decided he was going to put all his eggs in one basket to try and reach for heavyweight glory in something that he's recognized in his son early on. Now, obviously, this weekend, in the time that this is being recorded, Tom Aspinall was on his way to New York to watch John Jones taking on Stipe Miocic. Obviously, a fight that really serves a lot of interest in his corner. He's the interim champion. John is the linear champion right now. That is, if you don't count Francis Ngannou and his contract negotiation issues with the UFC that ultimately led him to departure. But either way, it was a very important matchup for John Jones and Stipe and Tom Aspinall as well. The only difference is that now we have to figure out who is the best heavyweight in the UFC. Now, I think that is besides the point of this video. You want to know why? Because obviously, Tom Aspinall is in a position right now where we can even argue the fact that he is better than John Jones. Now, we're not talking about just setting up the fights because that right now is sort of up in the air. We don't know what's going to happen with that and the contract negotiations and the strategy behind John Jones's team in ways of trying to get more money from the UFC. Okay, but that is besides the point. What is important is understanding Tom Aspinall is already here. Now, he's not there yet because in terms of fighting John Jones, but he's there. Now, the question is, how did he get here? Because that is the main topic at hand that we want to talk about. Obviously, over the years, we've seen John Jones dominate the light heavyweight division for a very long time. And now all of a sudden, John had decided after the Dominic Reyes fight to jump into the heavyweight division. And now what happened? Cyril gone. He gets the undisputed championship, not the interim championship. And now the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world right now is so heavily disputed. But guess what? That right there is a life story for Tom Aspinall to complete later on. Right now, let's look at his past life experiences to sort of understand where this man is right now in his current career. And so the obvious theme that I'm trying to emphasize here is that you cannot have a plan B when it comes to searching for glory. And by the way, Tom Aspinall's dad, Andy Aspinall, is the main topic at hand of this particular story. Look, we all talk about the epidemic that is going on with fatherless homes and things of that nature, right? So it's very refreshing when we run across a story like Tom Aspinall and his dad. Now, what a lot of people don't know is that Tom Aspinall's dad had decided he was going to quit his job so that he can focus on Tom Aspinall's talent full time. He recognized early on, hey, you know what? This kid has a talent. And if I put all my eggs in this basket, it's going to work out. And I think this story right here is very important for a lot of people to really learn and understand. You want to know why? Because there's a lot of people out there that have, let's say, a halfway approach to the goals that they are trying to accomplish. Now, look, people need to understand if you want to become a doctor, if you want to become an engineer, if you want to become a lawyer, these things are highly attainable, way more attainable than being the heavyweight champion of the world in the UFC, in the heavyweight division. However, there is something that Andy noticed about Tom that was special, and he decided he was going to go all in on that. And I think this is something a lot of you really need to understand. There's people out there that are going through life halfway into whatever goals that they want to do, and it starts very young. You see, when you're young, people tell you, hey, you know what? You got to go out there. You got to get a job. You got to go out there. You got to fulfill these particular obligations. You got to go to school. But here's a reality. What if a job or what if a school is not good for your journey? You see, during this weekend, not only did John Jones and Stipe fight, but another legend fought, and that was Jake Paul. Kidding. Obviously, Mike Tyson was also part of that. But the first trainer of Mike Tyson told him, hey, you know what? We can't put you in school. You want to know why? Because it's not a good environment for a future heavyweight champion. Now, I don't know why Custom Model thought that. I could give you a couple of theories as to why. One is probably because of the fact that you do nothing in school but take orders all day and you're sort of missing out in training. You see, you can wake up in the morning and train very early and this and that, but then where is your recovery time? Right? You're going to be in school sitting in these hard chairs for 6 hours on, being told what to do, being programmed in your brain, being told that, hey, you know what? If you don't go to college, if you don't get a degree or you don't do this and that, then you're never going to be anything. And then guess what? It does nothing but steer you towards a plan B. And this right here is the story that we're going to emphasize with Tom Aspinall and his dad, Andy Aspinall, which, by the way, is a very intriguing story in and of itself. So, the best way to really convey this story is go through articles leading up to 3 or 4 major fights that sort of made Tom Aspinall the Tom Aspinall that we know him today as the number one threat to John Jones. And those 4 fights in particular are the Curtis Blades fight, his last loss, by the way, literally lost in 15 seconds due to a knee injury. And then the Myson Tybura fight, the Sergey Pavlovich fight, and then the Curtis Blades fight. Well, this article that we have in front of you right now was just right before the Curtis Blades fight. Okay. Very interesting story right here. UFC London's Tom Aspinall is the dad of 3 on the cusp of a UFC heavyweight glory who almost quit MMA out of frustration. By the way, there's the plan B diagnosis right there, right? Almost quit MMA out of frustration. And to be fair, and to be honest with you, Dana White said it best. MMA is an opportunity, not a career choice. Oftentimes you hear people complain about fighter pay and things of that nature, but that is the reality of the situation, right? It will make a lot of people quit out of frustration, even if you have a winning record. Okay, so Tom Aspinall set to rock the O2 Arena tonight. This was back in 22. Okay, will top the UFC bill tonight. Pivotal heavyweight showdown against Curtis Blades. Okay, so these are some of the photos that involve Tom Aspinall here. Aspinall is stunningly on the cusp of winning a world title. Okay, less than 2 years after his debut in the promotion. I believe his debut in the promotion was in when was that? That was in 2020. Okay, so he came in literally during the pandemic. So yeah, Tom Aspinall came into the pandemic. He's not looked back since making his octagon bow on Fight Island, where he brutalized Jake Collier in 45 seconds. Then earns 36,000 pounds, which is $50,000 in American dollars out of performance bonuses. See, I don't even understand the British pounds and the American dollar exchange, but I know that 36 equals to $50,000 because guess what? That is the performance bonus that they give out. So Tom Aspinall at the time was 29, has all comers in record time, 5 octagon outings. Okay, so, but let's go back to his father right here. But the Team Gabun's journey, which began in his garden shed with his dad Andy at age 6, was far from an easy one, with financial struggles being ever present. And again, remember, this is one of those situations that's going to want to make you quit. He told BBC MMA in the UK, especially being a heavyweight, it's near enough impossible to make a career out of it. Mm. I absolutely had no money and had decided to provide for my family. Some days I'd only have literally 20 quid to my name. Inactively early in a professional career, which was often the result of opponents pulling out at the last minute, not only deprived Aspinall of the opportunity to better himself, but denied him much needed money to feed his family. So you see, this right here, this is exactly what I'm talking about, okay? Is that you got to understand these types of pressures will make you quit. They will absolutely make you quit because you start thinking to yourself, you start really looking at the situation and you're like, well, is this really worth it? Is this journey really worth it? He recalled being a heavyweight MMA fighter in the UK is very tough. I had three little kids and had not a fight in 2 years because opponents kept pulling out all the time. There's just not a lot of active heavyweights, especially in the UK. So it's difficult to get fights and people want to protect their records. Yeah, it's just a tough time. By the way, Cain Velasquez had the same problem in the UFC. And not only that, even way before the UFC, he had one pro fight and they had to sign him to the UFC because realistically, nobody really wanted to fight him. And it made a very difficult time for his development. But eventually, Cain Velasquez made it to UFC, beat Brock Lesnar, went up through the rankings, and the rest was history. But Aspinall's frustration with not being able to get a fight, as well as his need for cash, almost prompt him to quit MMA, according to The Sun, USA. He said, I had a child, then we found out we were having twins. I wasn't getting regular fights, and people were like, what are you going to do? How are you going to provide for your family? Once again, talking about the whole Plan B situation, right? For whatever reason, Tom Aspinall believed in himself. And this is me saying this. I'm not quoting this news article right now. Okay. He decided, you know what? I'm not going to have a plan B. I'm going to go through with this full commitment head on. And that's that. I was training all the time, but the fights weren't coming. And that was probably the toughest time of my career. But his mom and dad, who were happy to lend him a score or two to pay the bills, convinced him not to pack it in. So there it is. Andy told the BBC, me and his mom, we sat down and we lent him money and we helped out. There was a lot of arguing and crying. Now, obviously, this is one of the things that will make a lot of people quit. Okay, you got to understand when there's money situations involved and it becomes tough and it becomes hard, man, let me tell you, people start arguing, people start panicking, and people really start becoming jaded to your dreams and whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. So that right there is point taken right there, right? There was a lot of crying and a lot of arguing, according to The Sun. We told them, please give it a go and see how you get out. I always felt Tom could make it to the top, so we went through a heartfelt, you've got to do this. Eventually, he turned around and he came back. So in other words, there it is. This is the main theme of the story. Andy decided he was not going to have a plan B. And for Tom Aspinall to think about quitting, he was also telling him, look, you can't have a plan B. There is only plan A. And that is for you to become the heavyweight champion of the world. Now, it was a relief for Andy, who wholeheartedly believed his son could make it to the top of the sport and looks back on their early training with great fondness. Okay. Now, here's something you got to understand, right? Every fighter goes through this, which is why it's not the most ideal career. That's something that a lot of people have to understand. Andy recalled in a UFC interview, Tom started to grapple when he was 6 years old, or even 7. When he was about 10 or 11, he started to really enjoy it. And because I was teaching jiu-jitsu, he was with me every day. And I quote from Andy Aspinall. And I quote, he did all the traditional sports, jiu-jitsu, boxing, and wrestling. Then I met Colin Heron from Kaboon, and it just came from there. Now, for those of you that don't know who Kaboon is, this is the team that he had trained with in Liverpool, along with Darren Till and along with Colin, that he had mentioned here in the article. Aspinall would eventually get consistency so desperately craved in 2016 in full contact contender with 3 fights in 3 months. Okay. But inactivity would soon plague him as soon as it ended up going 2.5 years without fighting. Okay. So imagine this. He went 2.5 years without fighting. Espinal ended his hiatus of his career back to back first TKO victories in Cage Warriors 101 and 107, which ultimately saw him to get a call in the UFC. And he's gone from strength to strength, making it to the promised land of MMA, stopping Collier, Alan Baudon, Sergey Spivak, and submitting former UFC and Bellator champions Andrei Arlovsky and Alexander Volkov. By the way, just remember, this is an article that was from 2016. So Aspinall is a far cry from where he was a handful years ago and finds himself touching the distance of a UFC title. Okay. So now he's in the UFC. Now he's on the cusp of touching a UFC title. So a solid victory over Blades tonight. And by the way, this article is from 2022. Okay. So July of 2022. So just keep in mind and keep that in perspective a little bit. Okay. He said, I will take it as it comes, the same way I do everything else. You can't guarantee the future, can you? You can't guarantee what's going to happen. I will cross that bridge when I come across it, he says. So obviously, we knew how that fight had ended up. 15 seconds, he was out just like that. And we move on to 2023, where he is about to come back. After his comeback, he obviously came and beat Myson Tybura, first round TKO performance of the night back in July 2023, a year after, literally a year after, like literally 365 days. Look at this. Look at this right here. Literally 365 days, July 23, 2022. Now it's July 22, 2023, and there it is, right? The Myson Tybura win right after that. Okay. So yeah, obviously now they're back in the mix. And now let's go to this article right here, right? Tom Aspinall, a proud dad of 3 on the brink of a heavyweight glory at UFC 295, almost quit MMA out of frustration. Again, literally the same article, almost the same article, but within November. This was right after the Myson Tybura fight. This is going into the Sergey Pavlovich fight now. Okay, so let's go to that article. Okay, set to make Madison Square Garden history. Okay, this was his own Madison Square Garden history that he had made, similar to John Jones this weekend. Let's get to the article. These are all the pictures that they have. Standing between the Wigan Warrior and becoming Britain's 3rd UFC title holder is the Russian wrecking machine, Sergey Pavlovich. Now, Tom Aspinall is a dad of 3. By the way, many people don't know that. 30 years old at the time, had blasted through all of his opponents since making his UFC debut in Fight Island. Okay, so we all know that. We've mentioned that in the last article. He told the Sun earlier, I've had a couple of tough times earlier in my career, stuff with injuries and not being able to get matches, and I was really struggling for money at few points, which is tough because I got children and stuff, and it was tough. And by the way, here's something you guys got to understand, right? This is a common thing that makes a lot of people quit. Obviously, you're out here trying to reach glory for being an entertainer or being an athlete, and then you have all these situations that you have to face as a struggling parent. And again, are you going to risk it all, or are you going to take the plan B? Again, the overall main theme of this whole entire story, right? But as we move on, let's get back to the article. Okay. So he told the Sun a couple of times, yeah, that's injuries, matches that was struggling for money at a few points, which is tough because I got children. He says Aspinall was convinced to continue fighting by his dad. So obviously, the main thesis of this whole entire story is that Andy Aspinall did not budge one bit. Aspinall was convinced to continue fighting by his dad and longtime coach Andy and his mom, who helped him while he was enduring a financial despair following a frank and honest sit down. So they've had a sit down and they had this conversation and said, hey, you know what? You have to do this. Because if you don't do this, you got it, nothing else, Tommy. You know what I mean? If you don't do this, what else are you going to do with your life? So, you know what? That's what it is. Okay. So, as we move on to the article, that conversation fortified his belief that he would one day compete for the UFC gold and eventually compete in the Big Apple. Okay, so again, the same story goes. He continued, on the other hand, I expected to be here. He said that he expected to be there. This wasn't something that Tom Aspinall doubted for 1 minute. He did never doubted for 1 second that he was going to be here. So moving on, Aspinall is proud as punch. What an interesting expression of language. Aspinall is proud as punch with what he's achieved in his career, although he won't sit back and smell the roses until he calls time on his career. By the way, many people would argue that John Jones is sort of calling to smell the roses right now in his career and calling it time on his career, as opposed to Tom Aspinall, who's right now in his prime. But another story, another topic for another time. He said, I think about how far I've come and stuff. It's good, but I don't really have time to do all that. I think that it's something that I look at when I'm retired, because the minute I'm just in the moment, at the minute, I'm just looking forward to Saturday, which, by the way, this was the Sergey Pavlovich fight that I'm reading about. Aspinall must pass one of the toughest tests in mixed martial arts, which is Pavlovich, to achieve his dream, winning UFC gold. So, for those of you that remember, obviously, this was Tom Aspinall's fight with Sergey Pavlovich. The Wigan Warrior is confident in becoming Britain's third UFC champion, which he did. The Russian Behemoth was the backup fighter for the canceled fight between John Jones and Stipe. So, how about that? Stipe and John were supposed to fight during that time. They never did. They did this weekend, but in came Tom Aspinall and Sergey Pavlovich. So we all know what happened to that particular story, right? Tom Aspinall had beaten Sergey Pavlovich, and then he moved on to take on Curtis Blades once again to avenge his loss from literally 2 years. Okay, 2 years of UFC London. Well, now it's UFC Manchester, obviously. But yeah, so moving on. Obviously, this isn't so much about the biography of Tom Aspinall, but rather more of his dad's perseverance to try and encourage him, which I think is an important lesson here for many people out there that are searching for glory. So Andy says, I quit my high paying job. Now, this is a revelation that's different from the other news articles. Obviously, Andy had a high paying job. Let's find out what that is, and maybe we will, maybe we won't. But for what we know in face value and what Andy is telling us here in TalkSport article, he quit a high paying job to teach his son MMA in his back garden, which obviously is some things that you've seen in these photos right here, right? This is literally the back garden that Andy Aspinall is talking about right here. So let's go on to this article by Talk Sports, right? Just right before I believe this was just right before the Curtis Blades rematch. So British MMA star became the interim heavyweight champion by knocking out Sergey Pavlovich at UFC 295 in New York last November. So now we go from November to this summer in July. Okay. So right here, this is Tom Aspinall right here in this photo. But yeah. So Aspinall's journey to the top of this sport started when he was 19, when his dad walked away from a lucrative job to help harness his son's athletic ability and eventually open a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school. Obviously, that is why we have Aspinall Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which, as you would imagine, the membership of that gym is probably at an all-time high right now and an all-time demand, being that it's Tom Aspinall's gym and his dad. Well, so he did 25 years in IT. So basically, he is a computer engineer of some sort. That's what IT is. I was a contractor for a long time making good money. And then I was an IT manager. I got offered redundancy payment that I didn't have to take, but Tom was very good at jujitsu, and there weren't many jujitsu schools open. Worth noting, Tom Aspinall's dad was the first black belt in the UK, I believe, in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, at least one of the first black belts, similar to John Kavanagh in Ireland, who was one of the first uh, black belts in Jiu Jitsu in Ireland. So Tom's dad, Andy, has a very similar story. So he said that it was a bold move, but one that worked out as Andy's eldest is now one of the biggest UFC stars, and his other son, Joe, makes a living teaching Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. He added, I had some money then, so it was all right. I'm glad I did it. So, in other words, the reason why he took the risk of doing this, try to understand, is because Tom Aspinall's dad had already accumulated and saved enough money from, by the way, a high paying job. Now, look, here's something I need to emphasize, right? This type of conversation, this type of talk right now, I'm going to be honest with you, this is not for everybody. You want to know why? Because I got to be honest with you, not everybody is going to make it. Now, look, this is a once in a lifetime story. This is one of those situations where, yes, he actually had made it. But to give this same advice to the same person, to different people, not the same person, but to different people with contrasting situations and various outcomes in their life, I think that would be unfair. Also, you got to recognize your talent, right? I'll give you an example. For one, why am I trying to reach the top of the heights in this YouTube industry? Well, because I think that I can do it. I think that I have the voice, I have the articulation, I have the experience of public speaking. And I think after a year or so, now I'm becoming more of a YouTube vet. So there are possibilities and reasons why I should continue. Now, if you're one of these people that after a couple of years, you've only had 10 subscribers, well, man, you got to really rethink about what you're doing. Let's say if you're a journeyman boxer, a journeyman MMA fighter, and you're just getting beat every weekend, you got to start really thinking about whether this is for you or not. But if you know and you understand what your capabilities are, man, let me tell you, you got to go after it. And Tom Aspinall's dad recognized it. Now look at where they're at. The other son, Joe, is teaching BJJ. He's making a living off of that. And Tom Aspinall is one of the biggest stars in the UFC, and he's making a living off of that. So back to the Talk Sports article, right? Not just for Tom's fighting, and I quote from Andy Aspinall, I'm glad I did it because I didn't like the environment. I don't like the politics. I like the quiet life. And this has been a quiet life. Now, can you imagine that? Imagine being an IT guy, right? You're a normal guy, you're a normie, you're literally one of these NPCs that wakes up in the morning just to get a coffee, just to try and rush to work like everybody else in this whole entire human race that they're trying to get into. But you start thinking, look at these guys are in the MMA world. That's a quiet life. Indeed, it is. Think about it. The only thing that you worry about as an MMA fighter or as an MMA coach is the night of the fight, worrying about that. Now, obviously, coaches have more fights to go to than the actual fighters themselves. So they're going to be there at a high frequency rate every week. That is, of course, if the other fighter is not a trainer as well. But either way, uh, that's the only time that you really have to worry about the fight. Okay, is the actual fight itself. But overall, life of a fighter is quite peaceful. You wake up, you train, and then you go home, you eat, you sleep, and then you train again, get some nutrients, and then you train again. And next day, rinse and repeat. That's a quiet life. Whereas if you are in the corporate world, there's a lot of backstabbings going on. There's a lot of dudes that are trying to undercut each other, that are trying to kiss butt to the boss, that are trying to get in good with the boss so they can get in their good graces. And then because this guy is the boss, he thinks that he's better than you because he's his friend. And then there's a lot of biasness going on, so and so forth. This is the quiet life, according to Andy Aspinall. Okay, so however, Aspinall's long journey to the pinnacle of MMA wasn't without some hiccups, and he needed helping hand to push through some tough times. Now, look, you want to talk about tough times, right? Let's look at Tom Aspinall's record early on, because when you look at it from the time that he had lost in May of 2016, right here against Lucas Prawovic in May 14, 2016 in Birmingham, I think he lost by illegal downward elbow. Wow. Similar to John Jones, isn't it? That's literally the same situation that John Jones had faced. But at that point, he was 4-2. Okay. Most guys that are in this record right now, they'll tell you, hey, you know what? Maybe it's time for you to look for a job and do other things, maybe go to school and this and that. This is when you become 50-50 in your whole entire process of reaching glory. Why? Because now you're unsure. This is why I say you got to focus only on plan A. That is if you know and understand that you have the talent for it. Now, obviously, he understood that. After that, a few months later, he gets back at it in June, gets a first round knockout against Camille, and then after that, gets another knockout or TKO by a leg injury, and then another TKO, and then next thing you know, he's fighting Jake Collier, Alan Bodad, Sergey Pavlovich, and the next thing you know, he's fighting Alexander Volkov in one of these famous London cards that they usually have in March. And then next thing you know, now he's a big superstar in the world of mixed martial arts. Okay, so that's really an interesting life story that Tom Aspinall is going through. Okay, let's go back to the article to sort of give some more context in this. Okay, from training in his back garden to changing sports and overcoming injuries, a 31-year-old contender dealt with multitudes of issues, but managed to overcome them with help of his father. Now, what did he mean by changing sports? Well, let's go back to Tom Aspinall's record, okay? Right here, he has one professional boxing bout against this guy named Thomas. I mean, at this point, it doesn't really matter who their name is, but yeah, the guy named Thomas, who he knocked out in the first round in Manchester. It was a fight card in Manchester. I'm not sure which one it is, but yeah, it was a first round knockout. So we are talking about 2017. This was between the time that he had lost by a downward illegal elbow and then got back and won. And yeah, and then in between that 2018, he didn't really fight. And that was where he sort of took the hiatus right there. So yeah, he definitely did have some struggles along the way, right? And okay, so going back to this article with so from training in his backyard to changing sports, overcoming a multitude of injuries, dealt with a multitude of issues, but managed to overcome them with the help of his father. With the help of his father, right here, that it says right here on Talk Sports. So a couple of times he'd given up. Andy admitted he didn't want to fight MMA because there were no opponents. He didn't want to train in the gym because it was too far to go every day, and he didn't want to do it because there was no one to train or fight with. By the way, very difficult for a heavyweight, obviously. We went boxing and he had one pro fight, as I had mentioned earlier. And then he didn't want to fight because he didn't like the boxing model. He didn't want to fight people and get a padded record out of it. He wanted to fight people who were equal to him. So he stopped boxing. By the way, a very common contrasting view of boxing and MMA, right? Obviously, in boxing, they are willing to pad your record and do all of these journeyman fights and eventually put you out there when you are ready, or basically sacrifice your record when there is a bag on the line. Maybe there's a championship fight or a big name. Okay, let's do it. Let's risk it for the biscuit this time, right? But in MMA, you're constantly risking it for the biscuit every time. And this is a reason why there is no frauds when it comes to UFC champions and anybody that fights at that level. Okay, so Going back to the article, despite his rocky road to the UFC, Aspinall's dad insists he always knew his son had elite level athletic ability and would ultimately reach the pinnacle of his chosen sport. So, this is what I want to emphasize to people and what I constantly talk about, right? If you know that you have the ability to make it and reach that glory, why not go for it? Stop listening to the naysayers. They're going to constantly doubt you, they're going to constantly put you down, and they're not going to believe in you. Only you can believe in you, and only you know what is inside of you and what you are capable of. So back to the article. During his rise to becoming a champion, he was seen off big names in Alexander Volkov and Andrei Arlovsky. Okay, we talked about that. He also used to win a lot of jiu-jitsu tournaments, so I knew he could be really good at something where you take instruction. He could have been a rugby league, it could have been a range of sports, it just happened to be MMA. So in other words, the athletic ability of Tom Aspinall can take him to any sport, and it just so happens that it's MMA. And guess what? His dad is a jiu-jitsu black belt, so it was perfect. It was a proud moment when Aspinall KO'd Pavlovich in 69 seconds before dedicating his title to his father, who was reeling from a recent personal loss. Now, what is his personal loss? It was great that he won, but the whole occasion was a bit rushed, Andy said. Should we have taken it? It turned out good, so everything is all right. It was emotional for me because my dad watched the Myson Tybura fight with us and said, "You'll beat that guy and then you'll win the title." And then my dad sadly passed away, which obviously is a grandfather of Tom Aspinall. So that was raw at the time and thought my dad then, but it was really good. Andy will be in his son's corner and defends the title against Curtis Blades at UFC 304 Manchester, which, by the way, had already passed, and which is where I'm talking about this article. So Andy concluded, in terms of Tom fighting and getting used to the time scale, he worked out the doors 5 years and came home at 6 a.m. So hopefully he can go to bed all day if he wants to sleep, and he'll be fine. And obviously, we knew what had happened in that fight. The rest was history. So going back to the main topic at hand, you can't have a plan B in whatever you want to do in life. You just can't do it. Okay? Again, let me emphasize, this is not for everybody. I can't emphasize to everybody that you should go out there and risk it all and potentially become homeless because you didn't try and reach for your glory. You didn't try. And I mean, look, if you didn't try, man, you're going to have a lot of regrets. But at some point, you got to know your limits. But ultimately, here's what it is: you can't have a plan B. Okay. I can name you several stories as to why you can't have a plan B. Okay. I may or may not have to mention certain names of people that I've trained with in the past, but I'm going to try to convey this story the best way I can. Okay. All right. Well, if you made it far in this video, the next person I'm going to talk about is a dude that I trained with before, right? Angelo Trevino. Now, I was a little bit reluctant on sort of mentioning this because obviously you're not in this game to try and disrespect your friends, right? But at the same time, the truth can never be considered disrespectful. Just to kind of give you a context of who I'm talking about right here, this fella right here, right? So, a little interesting fact about this fellow, this kid, when I trained with him during his time of, let's say, I think being in high school, he was a pancreation fighter. Pancreas, what am I saying? Pancreation fighter. He was a pancreation fighter, which basically was MMA, but punching on the stomach and punching on the body rather than the head. But everything else is obviously MMA centric. And he was also a wrestler. So he was a phenom coming up, right? He was 16 or 17 at the time. And at the time, I was fighting for an amateur kickboxing championship, and he helped me train for that as well. I also trained with him in Team Alpha Male. But Uriah Faber mentioned, I believe, in a UFC interview where he had shouted out Angelo Trevino. But he mentioned something to the effect where, you know what? A lot of people have gotten into Angelo's head. He was in a contender series. He had lost, I believe. I believe he had lost to uh I don't know who it was. I think it was Austin Vanderford. I think it was Paige Van Zant's boyfriend that he had lost to. But anyways, uh it was in a contender series. He had a chance to when he lost, and Uriah Faber sort of cited the idea that, hey, you know what? A lot of people are getting in his head. He's taking these odd jobs in between and this and that. And the reason why I brought this up is because what Uriah was trying to emphasize in that whole entire story is that, man, you have to be all in and not worry about anybody else. Okay. That's sort of the main thesis that I'm trying to emphasize here, right? But now, obviously, he's now moved into Florida. I'm not sure which team he trains down in Florida with, but obviously he trains with a new team. I'm sure he trains with Team Alpha Male as well. He's originally from Carmichael, which is basically a town within Sacramento. But either way, that was an important point that Uriah had made. Where is he now? He's on a 4-fight win streak right now. I believe his last win was at a regional scene down in I believe Florida. But yeah, he had one back in August. So he's on the right path. He's doing the right things right now. And I think that he sort of took Uriah's advice on being all in. Don't have a plan B. This is the main thesis of this whole entire topic is you can't have a plan B. People always want to try to throw you into having a plan B all the time, right? And I understand that. I sort of understand that. Reason being is because, look, people are just concerned for you, right? Even Conor McGregor's dad, believe it or not, he asked him to have a plan B as well. Okay. I mean, if you could imagine that, his dad asked him to have a plan B. He said, hey, listen, you got to go into plumbing. You got to do this and that. What did Conor say? He said, man, I'm not with all that. I'm totally not down with any of that whatsoever. Well, lo and behold, guess what happened? He became probably one of the biggest superstars in MMA, and that's ultimately what you have to do. Look, I'm going to end this video maybe for a couple more minutes and just go into why you should never have a plan B if you want to reach any type of glory out there. Look, here's something you got to understand. The majority of people out there are working in jobs that they really don't like, that they really hate for a multitude of reasons. For one, most people work for other people to better their situation. Okay, so in other words, if you work for Tesla, if you work for Tesla, are you really helping yourself or are you helping Elon Musk? If you work for Apple, are you really helping yourself or are you helping Steve Jobs? If you work for Microsoft, are you really helping yourself or are you helping Bill Gates? And again, at some point, somebody has to be our boss, right? That's just the natural order of life. You can't get around that. So, because of that natural order of life and something that you can't get around, there's only a few people in the world that can actually get away with being their own boss. And that's an important that is an important thing to really emphasize above all. Okay? Really an important thing to emphasize above all. Because understand this. Everybody always wants to talk about being their own boss, being an entrepreneur, being a top hustler, or this and that. But a lot of people don't really want to take the anguish that comes with it. I swear to you, there's a lot of anguish that comes with it. But at the same time, there's also a lot of glory that comes with it as well. And that's something that a lot of people, they don't want to take that risk. They don't want to take that risk. They're comfortable. Most people are comfortable where they're at. And quite frankly, can you blame them? So, with that in mind, we got to understand a lot of people are too comfortable with their situation and they're never going to try to get out of it. Okay. Like if they have a job that pays them right, that pays them enough to get by through the day and this and that, yada, yada, so on and so forth, they're not going to try and step out of line. Now, look, can you imagine Andy Aspinall in this particular situation, right? He had a job that was more than comfortable. I'm talking about a high paying job. Look, bro, a lot of people out there that tell you to go to college, they tell you to go for medical, maybe even being a lawyer or a solicitor, as they call it in the UK and Ireland, or become a computer guy, an IT tech guy. A lot of these guys in San Francisco and the Bay Area, they're making a lot of money just from IT, right? A lot of the Indians and Chinese and Asian Americans that are in that field, they're making very good money. And a lot of them live in the Bay Area of Northern California, which is the IT tech hub of the world. And they're making a very good amount of money. Now, remember earlier, I mentioned if you work for Microsoft, you're uplifting Bill Gates, not yourself. If you're working for Apple, you're uplifting Steve Jobs and not yourself, right? Now, obviously, there's a lot of complaints that people have about Apple and Microsoft and the evil Illuminati people behind it and this and that. Well, okay, my challenge to the people out there that are in that field of IT and technological advancements or just plain old social technology, why don't you build something that rivals that? Now, the problem is, I think there is a monopoly in those particular types of endeavors. For example, if you were to come out with another Facebook or something, I don't know how that's going to last, considering that there is only one Facebook. Although you could say that MySpace was sort of there until Facebook took over, and then MySpace was just a thing of the past, a thing of nostalgia, literally a nostalgia that we look at in memes that talk about nostalgia. That's really the best way to put it. But overall, none of these people are willing to challenge these people because they're comfortable being employees. Okay. And that's sort of the main topic that I'm trying to get at with Tom Aspinall's dad here. He did not remain complacent. He did not remain in a job that he knew was nothing more than how do I say this, politics or just brown nosing, for lack of a better term, right? Uh Tom Aspinall's dad, in my opinion, I think got fired from his work. Yes, this is like a crazy revelation that I'm revealing to you guys right now. Now, look, I don't have proof of that. I'm telling you, in all fairness, that this is all speculation on my part. Now, why am I saying that? Well, look, here's something you got to understand about Tom Aspinall's father. Okay. The man is a person that you would consider non agreeable. I think that's the best way to put it, right? Tom Aspinall's dad is a non agreeable character. Now, look, here's the problem. If you're a non agreeable character, you're going to lose a lot of jobs. I'm just going to say it out frank. I've seen a lot of guys like that, guys with oppositional defiance disorders, guys that have a problem with authority, guys that are hyper skeptical about the world, people that are sometimes even arrogant or sometimes borderline narcissists. And again, not to say that Tom Aspinall's dad is a narcissist or any kind of way, but I just think that he's the type of guy that doesn't take any BS from anybody. And look, you look at the articles that we analyzed earlier, it's talking about he doesn't like the politics of the IT world. He doesn't like the fact that you have to try and mingle with this guy and try to kiss butt to this guy to try to get on top and you put yourself in the right position because you're sort of, how do I say this? Allowing the other guy to live in his own fantasy without telling him objectively what he's doing wrong. Now, I think he has every right to choose the kind of life that he wants to lead, right? But if you're looking at a world where you're trying to be financially independent versus a job that took you to college, got you this job because you have this particular skills that's going to get you a six figure, oh man, it's kind of hard to just go with trying to establish yourself, trying to become an established YouTuber, or trying to become an established athlete or entertainer. Because doing that, it's just a lot of risk because you don't have the resources around you. And again, this is the reason why I told you guys that this particular podcast and this particular video that I'm giving you right now is not for everybody. You want to know why it's not for everybody? Understand this, right? Not everybody is going to have the kind of opportunity, the kind of uh privilege that Tom Aspinall's dad had. I'm telling you, when you are a jiu-jitsu guy in England, I think it's fair to say you're middle class and above. Is that fair to say? You're middle class and above if you compete or train in jiu-jitsu in England. Now, look, a lot of the MMA guys in England did not start out with jiu-jitsu. A lot of them started out with Muay Thai, kickboxing, or boxing. And yeah, it's not a jiu-jitsu filled country in terms of people that are in the inner city. Oops, sorry about that. Had that on mute. I was saying that yeah, having yeah, so basically jujitsu is a middle class sport for middle class people. And why I'm saying that is because Tom Aspinall's dad had the means to take that risk. And maybe a lot of you should not take that risk as well, because again, this doesn't apply to everybody. But nonetheless, the important lesson to learn from this whole entire story is that you got to take risk, because if you don't take risk, then you're going to be imprisoned by your own comfortability for the rest of your life. And that right there is a prison that you can't see. Sort of like what David Icke, the conspiracy theorist from the UK, constantly emphasizes. Right now, look, you can say one thing about this guy, you can criticize him for the way that he thinks or this and that, but he may have a point there in that particular act. Look, a lot of people are always going to doubt you, even if you have the amount of talent that Tom Aspinall has, or anybody that has the potential to make it in the world of entertainment or in the world of professional sports, et cetera, et cetera. All these endeavors that are, quite frankly, extremely hard to do. But on any regard, here's one thing that you have to understand, okay? Tom Aspinall was going to quit. Now, why is this significant to bring up? Many of you don't have father figures in your life. And this is the reason why a lot of you are not in the next level that you need to be. And it may not be your fault. Some of it can be placed upon your own fault because there are certain actions that you can take. But then there are people out there that just don't have the resources to get to the next level, okay, or to get to the next thing. Look, I'll tell you something. This is a reality, bro. It really does take money. It really does take money to fight and to train. I'll give you an example. I know this white collar boxer in England by the name of Daniel Hamid. Okay. Uh, I got to tell you, this is really interesting what he had going on, right? So, right now, this brother right here has a 1-2 boxing record. Okay, so I'm going to show you, and I'm going to give you an example of why it really does take money and resources to go out there and fight. Dude, this guy missed out a fight. And again, this is all allegedly, okay? I'm just going to be fair about this. You could create all types of speculation you want, but just from the face value story of this guy was left behind on the day of his fight. In other words, he didn't have the money to get Uber or to get on a taxi or to get on any type of transportation because he was promised by one guy that he was going to be taken to that fight, and eventually he didn't. Look, I'm going to play you a video with what he had mentioned, and I'm going to react to it just to kind of give you context, okay? So this is the brother that we're talking about right here, all right? And this was his whole situation that he had going on. I've been around boxing pound for pound. It's given me opportunities, especially what it takes time to find people you truly trust outside of your bubble, but I can genuinely trust these people. Okay, so he's talking about the promotion being very helpful to him. Okay, so here's an interesting post that he wrote. P. Diddy got Pac unalived, and I'll tell you why he did it out of jealousy. Tupac was an upcoming star. My point is that jealousy can actually come from your own don't trust no one. The more you rise up in life, the more people want. Yeah, that's a good point. I'll tell you why. Because Diddy and Tupac were actually homies at one point. Okay, so here's a video of the stories that he was talking about. Let's play it right here.
Somebody I trust, somebody I really look up to, he let me down. I wanted to be there. I let Cheat Hazzy down and my opponent down. I'd like to apologize to my opponent, but yesterday it shouldn't have happened like that. I got dealt with and I got dealt with. I'm really upset about it. I was emotional, I was stressed the whole night. You don't understand. Step in the ring, it takes away your mental health, it takes away your dignity. Like you train for a fight, you put your mental health on the line, you're putting your safety on the line. So it takes a big man to step inside that squared circle. But
Yeah, he's absolutely right about that. It definitely does take a certain type of individual to get in the cage, get in the ring. And as a result, well, I tell you what, this is why I have respect for this guy. But I think his story and what came about this entire video that I'm making, I think is interesting in and of itself, right? So let's get to it.
last minute, this is what happened. I got stuck. Listen to me, people. Put yourself in my situation tomorrow. Put yourself in my situation. Who do you trust? Name one person you trust, and what if he tells you on the day, I can't take you, and genuinely you have no money to get to a taxi or a bus. You genuinely have no money to taxi.
So you see what I'm talking about? This is literally what I was emphasizing with you guys is that it takes money and resources to get to point A and point B. Now look, Tom Aspinall, you realize how privileged he is? His dad is an IT guy. He's a jiu-jitsu black belt, which means he doesn't need to go to a jiu-jitsu school and pay hundreds of dollars, rather have people pay them hundreds of dollars. Okay, and he's already ahead. He already has the privilege and the opportunity to go forward. And again, this situation that Danielle is talking about right here is very common with a lot of fighters. And for those of you that have been in MMA gyms and boxing gyms long enough, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Let's continue here.
Taxi there or a bus. So put yourself in my position. Like for 1 minute, put yourself in my position. You're nowhere. You're stressing all day. So listen, I'm Dr. Apologize. TT hasn't done a good job. He made my opponents at tickets. I made him look silly. They took. So this one person who really wanted to help me, I let him down, and I feel so bad. I got look like a complete dickhead.
So what he's trying to say here is that his opponent had sold all the tickets. His opponent wasn't really tripping about him not selling the tickets or not having the time to sell the tickets. I'm not really sure which one, but yeah, he's basically explaining and apologizing to his opponent, but also explaining, by the way, a story that if taken by face value, I think you should really yeah, man, I think that you should really take this story into consideration about what kind of resource problems a lot of fighters have. And also, I think he mentions here also the higher costs of living nowadays, which I think is an interesting point, but a reality that we can't ignore.
Yes, I'll be honest with you. Yesterday, I looked like a dickhead, and that's the honest truth. Like they made me look like a dickhead. But respect to pound for pound, they've helped me. They've done a good job against me. I respect what Tito does. He does a lot for his youngsters, and now he wanted to help me. Like he don't owe me nothing. He put me in his show, and who does he? Who am I that he owes something? Tito Hazim, he does not owe me anything. Who am I that he owes something? He's doing it in the goodness of his heart. He's trying to he's trying to create a legacy, and he's trying to help me for the goodness of his heart. And this is then he gave me an opportunity on his show to redeem myself because on my last fight I was ill, so he gave me this opportunity to build myself back up, and that's respect. P4P is a big platform.
So what he's mentioning here is that he had a previous loss that this promotion, this white collar boxing promotion in the UK, is giving him an opportunity to redeem that. And so, yeah, that's what he's talking about here. But let's continue on. And main point here is please understand it takes resources to fight. Okay. And many people underestimate this notion, but we'll continue on. I think you're going to learn a lot from this video that Danielle Hamid here has prepared for us. So,
And I got let down big time yesterday. That was ridiculous. I was supposed to go, but I got let down last minute. I got let down, and I think that's just so disrespectful, proper disrespectful to my legacy and everything. And I
now look, can you imagine this, right? Somebody offered you a ride to the fight and they're counting on you to do that, and you're the only one that can do that. Now, how much of a scumbag would you have to be to do that? Now, look, I want to be fair on that guy, the secret guy that we don't know about who was supposed to take him to the fight. Now, we don't know if this guy had some sort of emergency regarding a family emergency or something very life threatening and all of that. Now, look, remember, how about this in Cobra Kai this week, right? When it was released, one of the story plots, and I don't want to spoil this for anybody, but if you don't want to be spoiled by the Cobra Kai season 6 plot, please fast forward this part right here to a few seconds up. Okay, so here it goes. Daniel LaRusso was kidnapped in the middle of a tournament. Okay. And as a coach, his team needed him. And luckily, Johnny Lawrence was there to sort of sort of help out what was needed in that void. But anyways, let's continue with Daniel Hamid's story here.
I feel bad until now. What happened yesterday is just so disrespectful. This person, I ain't gonna ever forgive him. I blocked him and everything. He knows who he is. No point in me discussing it. But I was genuinely begging this person to take me. I said, look, T Tazim, I respect him. I don't want to embarrass T Tazim. I told this person, look, T Tazim is a good brother of mine. I don't want to lose him in my life. If I don't turn up, I make him look silly. Look, I told him this guy has made me sell tickets. Whoever this person is, I blocked him. I'm not gonna mention. I'm not gonna give him. I'm not gonna mention it after this. But look, I looked really silly yesterday, and now I feel bad what I did. I feel bad for my opponent. I feel bad for T Tazim because this is his show. He's doing me a favor. He didn't make me sell any tickets, so I feel bad for him. He's a good brother. So I genuinely feel bad. I don't know what to say what happened yesterday, but it wasn't my fault. I would always step a fight. I'd always jump in the ring. I would never run away from a fight. That's not who I am. I had 3 fights. I always show up. Whatever fight I have, I always show up. Yesterday,
Yeah, speaking of rig, right? A lot of people who don't train or are not in the sport of boxing or MMA or anything like that, they always call, oh, that fight is fake, like as if they know what it is that these men are going through with training, with motivation of getting in there and getting the W. That's something that a lot of people who have never searched for greatness or have searched for glory in any kind of way will never understand. All those people that sit behind their comfortable life in their small town, in their small surroundings, and never wanting to get anywhere. That's their attitude on those types of things. And I think it's a crab in the bucket mentality, which I think This man right here is emphasizing to all of us.
It could, yesterday, it wasn't meant to be. I tried my best to get there. I even almost said I'd meet the train station. You know, because train station you have to take a to train station. You have to pay. Then you have to pay. Then this person wanted to pay, and I asked him, "Can you collect me from the train station?" No, so I had to pay for the taxi as well from the train station. So this person, he didn't care about me, about how I got there, anything. But so it is what it is. But I'd like to apologize again to T Tazim for giving me a show, for helping me. But but I should have been more organized. I could have easily got there, but I shouldn't have put my mind on one person. That's the honest truth. Because this person had, like, he had people in his car, and I said, you know what, meet in the train station and pick me up from the train station in Birmingham. But no, he said no. Then they said get a taxi from the train station. That's too much. And you know what? It costs a lot to travel. The cost of living is too expensive nowadays. You can't travel. Everything is too expensive nowadays. Traveling costs a lot of money, and it was last minute. I couldn't travel, so I got, oh shit, no point me asking anybody for a lift. It's last minute. What should I do? So I was panicking. I was really upset. Then T Tazim, he had to go at me. Simple. I deserved it. But T is a good brother. May Allah bless his family, all his family, for give me the time of day. T, listen, brother, I'm so sorry what I did yesterday. I apologize, and it's not my fault. And T, listen, put yourself in my position. What if somebody you love let you down? Think
Yeah, this is a very good point. We're going to get to the part two version of this, okay? So right here, let's get to this right here.
what you say. So as boxers, your coach traveling, he takes care of that. Like, to travel to, like, far place, it costs money.
So think about this, right? If we can relate this to Tom Aspinall, okay? How do you think Tom Aspinall was able to rise through adversity? Remember what we had mentioned in the article earlier about his parents and his mom sort of providing and helping him through his struggle while he is trying to reach the top of being an MMA fighter. So just a thought in mind that I'd like to share with you on that.
The price, like, not everybody could afford it. Like, last minute, nobody could afford it last minute. So travel, like amateur boxers, elite amateurs, like in boxing, they have to travel. They have to, like, travel to different gyms. It's a part of the game. You gotta travel. If you love something, you gotta travel. But in December, when I phoned the show, uh, T had it off. I came in, as a man, I came there. I stepped in the ring. T knows this. As a man, I stepped in the ring, and I stood my ground, whoever I faced. I asked T this. T Tazim knows this. As a man, I stepped in that ring. I did not let him down. T Tazim knows this. But some people, people with Peterborough, like Shahid Milfield, he's a good brother. Shahid's a real person. He took me. I put it on his case. You know what Shahid did? Let me tell you what Shahid Milfield did. When I asked Shahid, listen, bro, I don't have a lift for the last year's December fight. Can you help me out? So you know what Shahid Milfield did? Let me tell you about Shahid. Santino Peterborough. Big up Santino Peterborough. Santino Peterborough, big up. This is what they did. So Santino Peterborough did not leave Peterborough until I got a lift. He made sure I got a lift. Not once, but twice. Once he asked for cars to bring me. Second time, he took me himself. He made sure that, because he knows how embarrassing it would have been if I didn't turn up. Santino Peterborough knew, because he knows it's gonna be bestie for me. It's gonna be bestie for my whole family. If I don't turn up to December fight, my whole family's gonna be bestie for them. He knew that. So because T hasn't got me an opponent from Bradford. So this is what he did. He made sure I got to the venue. I went to the venue. Alhamdulillah, I've reached the fine. I had the fight. Then after that, I earned T Tazim respect. T knows this. I never let him down. Yesterday, I got let down. T, listen, I'm so sorry. It costs a lot. T Tazim, put yourself. Anybody, please, tomorrow, put yourself in my position. Like, somebody you trust let you down last minute, and you begged him to bring you, begged him, and he said no. So put yourself in my position. I'm not angry or anything, but put yourself in my position, and I'm really.
I mean, credit to Daniel. He said he's not angry or anything. I would be absolutely livid. So kudos to him for being cool, calm, and collective about this. And you know what? By the end of the day, understand that it is all Allah's will. Even though somebody did promise to help him out, that wasn't the case. But unfortunately, it's just a whole crab in the bucket mentality. Well, anyways, guys, that is all that I have for you in this one. If you want to check out the rest of that, check out Daniel Hamid on Facebook. It is DANYALHAMID, like Prince Hamid, or I think he spells it with an E, but Daniel here spells it with an I. So Hamid as in HAMID. It is on Facebook. Go check out that video if you want to see the rest of it. Point being and point blank, you can't have a plan B, and you need resources in this game when it comes to funding your future and your goals and aspirations as a high level and championship level mixed martial artist or boxer. So for now, that is all that I have. This was an epic content to make and a very exciting project as well. By the way, only took me an hour to do it. Nonetheless, here it is. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Watch all of my videos. Watch from top to bottom. Like and subscribe. Tell a friend to tell a friend. And I will see you on the next content, inshallah.